Today we're taking a look at an article from Toronto media suggesting that now is the right time for the Maple Leafs to trade Nick Robertson to increase the number of elite blue liners the team has. We'll discuss that philosophy, what it means, who could they go after, and we'll discuss that whole scenario, along with the fact that Ethan Bear is still on the market as well, a defenseman out of Carolina. Plus, we also have news from the NHL waiver wire. Some history was made by Rasmus Dahlin and more. We'll discuss all that coming up next. Well, welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade talk to take a look at here in just a few moments. First up, though, I just want to take a moment and wish Lou Lamoriello a happy birthday. Of course, I know he's never going to watch this video, so he's never going to get my birthday wishes, but just want to acknowledge his birthday. He is turning 80 years of age, becoming the first general manager to make it into his 80s managing an NHL franchise. Previous to that, Frank Selke, who was made it up to age 77 working in that role. There's many guys that have made it into their early 70s, maybe closer to mid 70s, but Lou is kind of pushing the envelope here. So of course we know he's been in the league a really long time, very well respected, two-time GM of the year. I know his Islanders are had a tough game last night against the New Jersey Devils. Not a great birthday present for Lou, for sure. I know I've been critical of some of his work more recently, or lack thereof, but understanding that it's a tough spot that the team is in. I think with the salary cap and some players that ideally would like to move, but because of contracts, it's just really, really difficult. And no matter what we think of the recency of what's going on with the Islanders, or if you're a fan of Lou's work in the last year or so or not, either way, he's had one hell of a career, a legend in the NHL circle of hockey, so certainly want to wish him the best, and I hope he can get his Islanders to have a good season this year. Of course, speaking of some key milestones, let's talk about Rasmus Dahlin, the former number 1 overall selection a few years back at the Buffalo Sabres. I know it was not too long ago when some wondered if he might need to get a fresh, scenery, get moved to Buffalo. Things were not going well. He looked lost, looked like he wasn't progressing. But I tell you, ever since they've made the coaching change and Don Granato's been behind the bench with a whole different way of doing things there in Buffalo, things have definitely turned around. He's done a great job as a coach, and I think he's personally, along with his new assistants, have kind of had a major impact on Dahlin, and now he's starting to look a lot like the dominant defenseman that he was expected to be when he was drafted. When he was drafted, they were calling him a potential generational type of defenseman. There were some pretty big words to live up to, and sometimes that is not always good for players to have that kind of expectations, because it's really difficult to live up to it. But Dahlin has started the NHL season off to a really good start. Of course, his team is doing well as well. He's a big part of that. But he's made history with the longest goal streak by a defenseman to open the season. So he's had goals in the Buffalo Sabres' first 4 NHL games, which to some might not seem like an incredible feat, but the fact that no NHL defenseman prior to this has ever scored in his first consecutive 4 games to start a season shows just how difficult it is for a D-man to accomplish that. So, like I said, I've been extremely impressed with the developments that we've seen here from him. We've been noticing it a bit more last year, and this year he just seems that much more confident again, and playing with poise and playing with confidence. And it's just turning into an absolute beast at both ends of the ice back there. So we knew he was drafted with a ton of potential, but where everything was at, of course, that was still during the Eichel era, and the team was a bit of a mess. And then, of course, they've transformed to a lot of changes, and a lot of those changes have been very positive. And even though it's tough to win trades when you trade a top player like Jack Eichel, that deal so far is working out okay for them, and the team is in a much better spot. And Dahlin is certainly going to be a huge part of it moving forward. And just having another defenseman like Owen Power, who's also a first overall pick a couple years after Dahlin, you got to wonder, in a couple of years' time, if he's going to become that same dominant D. They really could have one heck of a blue line on their hands and really become a force in the Atlantic as they turn the tables here and get out of the rebuild and get into being a more competitive team. I think, like we've seen, the Senators have the last couple of games off flying at home. The Red Wings are looking good. The Sabres are looking good. I think the Atlantic Division is going to be a lot tighter this year, regardless of who gets in the playoffs. A lot tighter, a lot more entertainment, and we're going to see I think it slowly, at least, a bit of a change of the guard as some of the other teams might take steps back, to take steps forward, and it's just going to get really, really interesting, which is great for the fans and great for entertainment and good for these fan bases that have been kind of dealing with an extended period of time with no playoffs to get back in the mix. Now, we also have news from the waiver wire. Of course, yesterday we saw Michael Kepney be placed on waivers with the Seattle Kraken for the purpose of contract termination. Of course, no big surprise, but he cleared. The contract's officially terminated, so he's a free agent and can go elsewhere. Like I said, I'm not really sure if he's going to be sticking in North America or if he's got opportunities in Europe that he's looking to. We'll probably hear something soon, but it may not necessarily be in the NHL. And the Minnesota Wild have placed defenseman Andre Schuster on waivers today, so we'll find out tomorrow afternoon if he's claimed or if he can be reassigned to their minor league affiliate. A couple of items as well, including an injury. The Winnipeg Jets have officially put Nick Ehlers on IR. He's obviously been absent from their lineup here for a bit, but that is retroactive back to October the 18th, and they've recalled Dominic Toninato to come up as a replacement. So, of course, Ehlers has been dealing with an injury here for the past few days. Hopefully, it's not going to keep him out for too long term, because he's certainly a huge part of that team and their ability to put up some offensive numbers for sure. And the Florida Panthers have signed veteran centerman Eric Staal to a one-year deal at $750,000. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he turns 38 years old during the season. So certainly after being out of the league for an entire year, be interested to see how he can do in Florida. Of course, the Panthers had interest in signing him right off the get-go at the end of training camp. They just weren't able to do it because they just did not have the salary cap space to even make a league minimum contract work and be cap compliant. But of course, now we saw the injury to Aaron Ekblad. He goes on long-term injury reserve. That opens up some space, and boom, they can get Staal signed. Of course, he has a lot of history with Paul Maurice, the head coach. That probably helped his case a little bit. But even during the year that he wasn't in the NHL, Eric Staal was still able to play some hockey. He did play some games in the American Hockey League as a prep to go to the Olympics for Team Canada. So he was certainly still, in some high-level hockey and still being in a competitive spot and training and all that. So we'll see how things go. I don't think he's going to have a huge role by any means. Might not even be an everyday player. I suspect it'll be similar to what we're likely going to see with like Derek Brassard in Ottawa, signed to basically be your 13th forward, but depending on injuries, he can jump in. He can play center, he can take some face-offs, he can even go back to the wing, be a real good pro for the younger guys on the team. Of course, his brother Mark is on the team as well. They both got tons of experience and could be great assets longer term in that regard. So we'll see how things work out. Very much a low-risk signing here by Florida with some potential good rewards as they get later into the season and into a likely another playoff battle. Now, as I mentioned as well, onto some trade talk. Look for Ethan Bear to hopefully have a new home soon. The young defenseman currently with the Carolina Hurricanes. Still lots of chatter that he's basically they're still trying to find a deal for him to get moved. He's yet to play this season. Certainly the Hurricanes have more than enough defensemen on their roster. It's hard for him to get in the lineup. Certainly it seemed like last year, I know he was dealing with some COVID stuff, but it did look like as well, like I think it's fair to say that he fell out of favor a bit with the coaching staff. So, for a right shot defenseman who's still relatively young, who's not making a ton of money, I think there shouldn't be too much difficulty to get him into a spot where he'll be able to get a bigger role and be able to play. Of course, like I said, we're seeing lots of injuries around the league. As we get through the next couple of weeks, there's probably going to be more. Lots of teams are already feeling it, and I'm sure that they're going to be taking a look at around the league and saying, okay, who might be available either through waivers or through a potential trade that's not going to cost too much. And I'm sure Ethan Bear's name is going to come up, and we're likely going to see him on the move here sometime in the not too distant future. Now, as I mentioned, I want to take a look at an article. There's an article by Michael Tracos, who writes for Post Media. The article I'm going to link down below, I believe, is on canoe.ca, but it's also in the Toronto Sun, talking about how now is the right time and the best time for the Maple Leafs to trade Nick Robertson. I was shocked to see this article today. Found it very interesting. I wanted to talk about it, give my opinions, but really, as much as I understand for Maple Leaf fans and fans of other fan bases, love to give it to the Toronto fans. We know that the Toronto fan base is enormous. It's the hockey mecca in Toronto. So certainly, when you look online, you do see a lot of other fans. They just seem to love to to pick on and poke fun whenever possible at the Leafs. Now, of course, the Leafs had a great game last night. They didn't have a fantastic 60 minutes, but they pulled off a big win against the Dallas Stars, and sometimes they don't ask you how you get it done, just that you got it done. Nick Robertson gets called up, of course, with Matt Murray on long-term injury reserve, opens up some cap space for the Leafs. They can bring him up for the minors. And really, you could argue that Nick Robertson absolutely 100% deserved to be on that Leaf roster on opening night. But because they're on a max of 50 contracts, because they have no cap space, they had no choice, because he did not require waivers, to put him in the minors and leave Denis Malgin on the NHL roster, playing a top 6 role with John Tavares and Willie Nylander. Now, of course, Denis Malgin, to his credit, also had a really solid preseason. Now, the NHL regular season so far has gone a little bit different. Denis Malgin's not putting up much in the way of points, not scoring goals like he was in the preseason. That's why we always caution when we talk about preseason, or even that's why some fans don't even pay attention to it, is because it doesn't mean anything. You're not getting full, complete NHL rosters. You're getting half NHL, sometimes half players that are going to be in junior or the American League, and it's just not the same level of competition. Even the NHL players that are in those lineups are not going full tilt, giving it their all. They're trying to get through it, not get hurt, get their timing back. It's just not the same. It's just plain and simple. And you can overreact easily to a player getting a bunch of goals or points in the preseason thinking they're absolutely going to tear it up, and then they don't. And then you're like, well, what happened? Because it's not the same. It's just that simple. That sometimes you get players in the preseason, they might play 2 or 3 games, and they might look quiet, and they didn't put up any points, and you might be all concerned going into the regular season thinking, oh, geez, this player didn't do much in the preseason. They're going to suck this year. I'm really worried for my team. And then they just carry on with their usual self and light it up like usual. Like, you just can't put the stock into it. It's just that simple. But fact is, you do have to use those games and what you see in practices and training camp as a measuring stick to decide who makes your roster and who doesn't. And unfortunately for many teams that are up against the NHL salary cap, which is a huge chunk of the league, sometimes decisions are involved with more than just stats or what you see on the ice. Sometimes contract status plays an absolutely big role in making those decisions, and it's unfortunate, but it's the way that it goes sometimes. If they put Denis Malgin on waivers after scoring all those goals in the preseason, they likely would have lost him. They could have put Robertson on the roster, sure, but now Malgin's gone, right? They'd like to have both. Who doesn't want to have that kind of depth? It's just the way it is, right? Plain and simple. So the thing that I don't get, though, is can't Maple Leaf fans even have one day to enjoy this victory? Nick Robertson comes up, plays his first game of the season last night. He plays against his brother, Jason, which I believe is the first time they've played against each other at the NHL level. Of course, Jason Robertson, a much more established NHL star who just signed a big deal in Dallas, coming off his RFA status after his ELC expired. Of course, his mom was in the building, having a great time. Robertson scores 2 goals, including the overtime game winner. He had a great performance, and not only did he have those 2 goals, he had a great defensive play on Jamie Benn when he was basically back stuck playing defense in the 3-on-3, and it looked like it was going to be bad. It looked like Ben was going to put a good move on him and go around him, and he managed to get a stick on it and break it up. Puck goes the other way. Matthews is down there with him, gets in the puck, and boom. Of course, Robertson, what he's best known for is his good shot, and he put it in right over Scott Wedgwood. So certainly a great game, and here we are the next day with an article saying, yep, they should trade him. So if you're a Leaf fan and you were upset or unhappy or not thrilled with this author, I don't blame you one little bit. But the fact of the matter is that they do have other issues on this team that could prevent, longer-term success, and that is on the blue line. We know Jake Muzzin's health is a major concern. We don't know that he's going to be back this year. We don't know that he's not going to be back this year. There's just a big question mark over his health. He's obviously a big part of that team on and off the ice, but he's had a lot of issues with head injuries and neck and all those types of things that are concussion-related, and they want to be careful with this. So let's just assume for a second that if he doesn't come back this year, that's a big blow back there, right? So you already got Timothy Liljegren, who's out until sometime in November, and the argument here in this article is that they need to be the ones to make the push to get the Jacob Chychrun trade completed and bring Chychrun to the Leafs. And why not use Robertson as a big piece of that? He said, essentially, that the premise of this article is that they don't need another elite forward. they need another elite defenseman. I don't entirely disagree with that. They could very much use another elite defenseman. But at the same time, you have a guy in Robertson who's, you wouldn't call him an elite forward yet. It's a little premature. He had one great game. He's had a couple other good showings. A little early, though. I want to see some consistency before I call him an elite forward, that's for sure. But the potential's there. We know that. If you've been following his development since he's been in the Leafs organization especially. But, you also have a very, very bad cap situation. It's tight right now. Robertson doesn't make a ton of money. He's not in a position unless, he really lights it up. Like his next contract might not be too bad either, depending on if you bridge him or whatnot once his ELC expires. So you're in a position where you can get, you hope, elite level performance. You hope he's the answer to that second line without making a ton of money. So, yeah, I get the fact that you could use another defender, but if you're moving out your ELC, those are the contracts you need to balance the books. And also at the same time, you can look and say, okay, well, John Tavares, yes, he's still playing well. Makes a ton of money, which is unfortunate he makes that much because it would really help their cap situation, but it doesn't matter. That deal's been done for a long time. Doesn't matter what you think of the contract. It is what it is. He's still being productive. He's still putting up points. He's still a big part of the team. But he's getting a little bit older. He's the oldest of the what you'd call their elite level group of players. Of course, you get Marner, Matthews, Nylander, all a fair bit younger. Certainly, all at slightly different stages there. And Robertson, of course, comes in as a little younger again. You need to have that youth. You need to have the ELCs. You got to balance the books. And really, this is the player you've drafted and developed, and now you want to move him after having his breakout game that, you hope will lead to having the really solid rookie season. It's mind-boggling, but at the same time, it's kind of challenging to disagree with the mentality here. I don't know. I personally think that they could certainly use another defender. I would be concerned about the absence of Jake Muzzin. I understand the concept of going after Chychrun, and if not Chychrun, a comparable defenseman, if you can find him out there. Chychrun does have a good contract that would help balance their books a little bit as well. I would just be extremely cautious of putting Nick Robertson in a deal. That, to me, seems awfully risky. Now, we know that if the Leafs don't see sustained playoff success this year, there's a much better chance than ever before that we could see maybe that core group maybe broken up and maybe one of them getting moved, right? Of course, that's looking too far ahead in the future. I can't predict if that's going to happen or not. Maybe the Leafs break through this year and it never does. But I'd be more concerned with maybe moving, if we're going to move somebody who I think is an elite forward, and if I think Nick Robertson can replace him, I would maybe consider moving, I don't know, maybe like a Nylander first, and then have Robertson be the cheaper version of that for the next few years. It helps you on the cap. Now, I'm not suggesting they should trade Nylander. I'm just using it as an example. But, at the same time, there's other ways to go about this than trading your young rookie who just had a breakout game. Anyways, I know what Toronto media can be like at times. If you're a fan, you've seen this article, I understand if it ticked you off. Can't you just have a day to enjoy this without thinking about moving him along? And while I do think getting a defenseman is important, I'm not sure that Chychrun is their guy. For one, the asking price is really high, and I'm not sure that anybody really should pay the prices that the Coyotes are looking for right now. And I think that if they can go about getting a defenseman, but using maybe just draft picks or lower level prospects would be the easier way to go about things, I would be really reluctant to move Nick Robertson, who looks like he has potential star in the making written all over him. So let him be a Leaf, let him succeed. You could greatly benefit from keeping him on your team as well. But let me know your thoughts. Is this author onto something? Should they be calling Arizona, offering Nick Robertson in a package to get Jacob Chychrun? Let me know what you think, and we'll discuss further down in the comments. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.